Okay, let's talk about the SAVE Act, which I hear about every day from Republicans. And here's another Polymarket. Will the SAVE Act be signed into law this year? Number 21, please, requiring an ID to vote in federal elections. Just a 23% chance. Steve, this is an idea embodied in this piece of legislation, supported by like 80% of Americans, not supported by the leadership of your party. What is it that the leadership of your party believes that the 80% don't?
Well, this is 80%. If everybody knew what was in the SAVE Act, 80% of the people would not be for
Well,
it.
no, the
If they
80%
knew
aren't
you
for the
had to go
state.
find
80,
your
80, no,
passport
no,
or
but
find your birth
just,
certificate, I don't think
yeah,
so.
yeah.
So
So,
it's not
so,
pi- it's not 80% of the people are support what is in the SAVE Act.
well, 80% though support requiring identification to vote.
Well, that is not what this bill does.
Well, it's part
So
of what it does.
but it's not what this bill does.
Yeah. Are you
Bills are
supportive of,
complicated, and they
yeah,
put a lot of other stuff in there
yeah.
besides just asking for ID.
Are you part of the 80% of Americans who support requiring ID to vote?
I think it's not a complicated issue. I don't think you ought to have a photo ID to vote. No, I do
No.
not. I don't think
Uh,
we want to make it harder to vote. I think, we have to have ID to get registered to vote. Um, there's lots of things we have to do, but that's a diversion from what the SAVE Act does. I don't think people should have to go find their passports because not everybody has a passport. I don't think people should have to go find their birth certificates because I just had to look for mine recently to get my marriage license. And it's hard to find your birth certificate when you're as old as we are, Mark. And I think there's many women whose names have changed through marriage or divorce. I just don't think I think it's more complicated than just to say we're for the SAVE Act. And they assert that the SAVE Act is just about showing up with a photo ID. And it's about much more than that, which is why Democrats are against it. We could have a bipartisan discussion about what are the best ways to encourage more people to vote. Um, that's fine, but they don't want to have a bipartisan discussion on that. They just want to do something that is not what they say it's doing.
Yeah, Natalie, sometimes in Washington, the White House or a political party wants an issue rather than to get stuff done. Uh, I hear the president and Caroline talk about this almost every day. I hear members of the Congress, the Speaker, the Majority Leader talk about it every day. Do you get a sense what's the Republican legislative strategy, since they don't have 60 votes in the Senate? What's their legislative strategy to pass this, or do they just want to talk about it?
I think they really just want to talk about it. I think they're really hammering it on the messaging front. I think the one of the most interesting things to me about the bill is that it doesn't actually necessarily even apply to the midterms this year if it were to pass. I know there's an amendment that's been pushed on it that would make it apply retroactively. So I think that's interesting. Obviously, the SAVE Act is something that they've been talking about for a lot of Congresses, but I think one of the bigger issues and why I think the SAVE Act is sort of a weak punch at voter integrity and election integrity, which I would say I do think we need to show identification when it comes to elections. Otherwise, there's nothing that's really stopping me from showing up to the polls and pretending to be Mark or Steve. But I think the ballot curing and the ballot harvesting is an issue that President Trump's base is probably more radicalized about, more focused on, and I think has a bigger impact than non-citizen voting on US elections. But it seems like the messaging strategy that they're really going with is non-citizen voting. I would suggest that they sort of broaden it out a bit, but it seems like they're really hammering that one hard.
David, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are and what's on your mind for Natalie and for Steve.
Yeah, I'm in North Carolina, and I just had a question about voter ID. I didn't know you had to have a passport to get an ID because Steve Elmendorf said most people don't have a passport. Well, okay, fine, but you don't need a passport to get an ID. And the other thing is, he did what Democrats always do. They come up with these pretty rare situations, like, women can't get an ID when they change their name, that it's really hard to do. No, it's not. I mean,
Did, did,
my wife did
yeah,
hers in took no time.
yeah,
All she had
David,
to do was
but
go to the
yeah,
DMV.
David, it's possible to do, but some people might be busy. How do you know that's a rare instance? How do you know? I'm not saying it isn't. I'm just wondering how you know. Just your intuition?
Yeah. I mean, I don't see a great big line of people women lining up complaining about the fact that they can't get their name changed. I would think that if it were that prevalent, you'd see a lot more about it. And plus, okay, you don't have the time. Well, if you don't have the time to do something relatively simple like that, then you must not want to vote very bad anyway.
Okay, Steve, let Steve respond to that. Steve.
Well, they do talk about how you need either a passport or a birth certificate for voter registration. So both of which are difficult. Look, I think we're trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist in this country. Unfortunately, Donald Trump has spent a lot of time creating his own fake news that there was some problem with the election, and everything we have seen is that that's not true. And everything we've seen is that the percentage of illegal voting is infinitesimal, like less than 1%. So we're trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist, and we're trying to make it harder for people to vote. And frankly, we should be making it easier for people to vote because, in states where we have mail voting, which I know he doesn't like California and Oregon and Arizona, or not Arizona, but Colorado, you get like 190% turnout, which is what we ought to have. We ought to have more people participating, not less people.
Natalie, you got your birth certificate and your passport?
Of course I do.
Okay.
I mean, I think there's a difference between votes and ballots. And I think that the discussion about ID, I think that it sort of presents this alternate reality where it's like we can either have everybody has to present, 18 different documents, or you just let everybody register and you have the DMV doing motor voter. For what it's worth, the ID requirements outlined in the SAVE Act are from federal law. It's a 2005 statute, right? Even if you have your ID, you just can bring one other representation or form of showing that you're a citizen. So I don't think that it's all that radical. But I think the issue is honestly less with the idea of these illegal aliens are going to vote. I think it's with what you said, Stephen, when you see these mail-in ballots being sent to random addresses that are being just sort of added to voter registration bases through the DMV. I think that's why it's important to verify if we're going to be shifting to these non-in-person voting mechanisms, because how can you certify any of that chain of custody of the ballot if you can't even guarantee that the person that it's being sent to is actually a citizen?
David, thank you. Wendy, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are what's on your mind for Steve and for Natalie.
Quick things, just to comment on voting, which is a hot button with me. In the state of Minnesota right now, the Democrats passed a law that undocumented people can get a driver's license. And in the state of Minnesota, they also passed a law that if you get a driver's license, you're automatically added to the voter rolls. You don't have to show any ID of any kind when you go to your precinct. And if you claim that you live in the precinct and you're not on the voter rolls, a person can vouch for 8 people that say, yep, they live in the precinct. Just a verbal vouch, and then they get a provisional ballot, and the provisional ballots go right in with the rest of them. So when we say there's no evidence of voter problems, we don't have any evidence that there's not. There's a million ways to cheat the vote in Minnesota.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's all this discussion, particularly among the left-wing, democracy scholar, Brookings Center type scholars about election skepticism growing in the United States, especially post 2020. But it just sort of seems like they want to beat Americans over the head into accepting the way that we run our elections when there are obviously problems. Anyone who would say otherwise is absolutely absurd. And it seems like they don't actually want to pursue any meaningful changes. And then when we try to talk about meaningful issues, they're just dismissed. So I would encourage the left to actually engage a little bit more on this. And maybe I would just put it through the lens of listen to your own base because they support it.
Steve, one more time. I know you've addressed it, but
I'm totally open to figuring out a compromise. So how about you have to show up with a driver's license or photo ID, but we're going to move election day to Saturday so more people can vote. And we're going to have no excuse absentee balloting so people can vote over multiple days. And that would encourage a lot of people to vote. And if you look at the numbers, there are some people who said if more people voted, it would help Donald Trump because less, people who are less committed to vote are more likely to be for Donald Trump. So let's try and figure out how can we work together to make it easier for people to go vote.
Natalie, how about election day on Saturday at least?
I would definitely support that. I maybe take a little bit of issue with universal vote by mail. I think historically, anytime you've seen that implemented, it has not worked well. It's rife with fraud. But I think if you were to put in meaningful citizenship verification, I would also maybe add to that. I think the ballot curing and ballot harvesting, date lot or dates and timeframes on that. I mean, it's like months after elections. I feel like you can still turn in ballots. So I think there's needed reform there too.
Right now, if you're interested in buying some stuff that's luxurious and comfortable, try Cozy Earth. Cozy Earth products. You've seen many people come on this platform and say how happy they are with the bubble cuddle blanket, with the sheets, with the towels. You've heard me talk ad nauseum about the pants. All available to you now, 20% off. Go to cozyearth.com. Use the promo code 2WAY for 20% off everything on the site. The Baja bedding set is available to you now. The luxury bath towel set is also available, the bubble cuddle blanket, and then the pants. Heard from another one of you over the weekend. It's Tuesday, so yeah, over the weekend, about wearing the pants to a big conference, and everybody acted like they were the nicest pants they'd ever seen. And then, of course, you can wear the very same pair of pants to the beach or to the gym. Go to cozyearth.com right now, buy the magical pants or any of the other products for 20% off using the promo code 2WAY, cozyearth.com.
They say that something that's easy is like a walk in the park. Well, easier than a walk in the park, hit the subscribe button, be part of the 2Way community, never miss an episode, be part of our conversations. Thank you for your service to America.
And don't forget, you can now listen to the morning meeting and 2Way Tonight on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.